All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking now to Preston Zeller. He's a very innovative entrepreneur who's doing some really cool stuff. I came across him via email, and he said, "Hey, this is something that might be interesting to your audience," and I think it sure is. So, Preston, you've created Psalmlog.com. That's Psalm like the religious Psalm, Psalmlog.com. And it's like a biblical counselor that uses AI to understand the challenges someone is facing and then act as their counselor. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what was the motivation for this, and what is it like building something like that?
Yeah, I mean, motivation it actually started from the standpoint of like journaling. People in general journal in the Christian space. And of course, I am a Christian. I understand that problem firsthand. Of people keep prayer journals, reflective journals, all that kind of stuff, and they amass notebooks over the years. And yet to meet one person who goes back and reads their old journals. And so when large language models started becoming more prominent, I'm like, that's an amazing data set that you really have there that you could
Right.
use to better understand yourself. So that's what Psalmlog started out as. And we launched, beta launched last August, so August 2025. Launched and started doing some tweaking to the onboarding and just, helping people get past the blank canvas syndrome because
Right.
that is the hardest part of journaling.
Right.
And I started realizing that people were actually wanting to use the application more to just like work through life problems, not necessarily to quote unquote keep a journal, although in in essence, that's kind of what you end up doing, but they wanted to solve problems. And so kept optimizing around that, did research and validated across over 200 believers that this is indeed the problem they're trying to solve, especially in between Sundays, where that may be the only time of week they're at church and can go ask a pastoral role or counselor there. And it is an incredibly interesting and also has its own challenges to solve, of course, because I'm using a new technology, new in the sense that we can harness it this way, and then also putting on the guardrails that you're not going to get maybe in a larger LLM to be able to mimic what it might be like to go sit with somebody and get that feedback
Hmm.
of your problem, and being able to understand the context of it too is also quite a challenge. But we have, I think, solved that in different ways and are continuing to refine it.
That, what's very interesting here is you've had the same idea or similar idea as I've had, which is that these LLMs are wonderful mechanisms for exploring content. And because you're focused on journals, well, to your point, when you journal, I mean, especially if it's digital, but even if it's written, you can scan it these days, and
Mm-hmm.
optical character recognition is good enough to pick up most stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tremendous foundation for your personal history and
Yeah.
also your personal history through the lens of really important things that you're trying to sort out with yourself. And to your point, no one, very rarely will people go back and read what they had written 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But to have a mechanism to absorb all that and then in a private environment, I mean, that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be, is private,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not sort of casting your feathers to the wind so everyone can know your problems. You
Mm-hmm.
have this environment for working things through. I think that's very, very clever.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so like, the current state today is, of course, you end up building just like you would in a written journal, but a series, a library, a personal library of feedback that you're
Right.
getting over time. But one thing that we've already kind of scoped out is then the ability, kind of like almost fitness apps do. That's, what I think about as a parallel to get a proactive plan on how you can improve, right? So, say I'm wrestling with, making a big decision about a job. Maybe I should move my family, or maybe it's just a relational issue with a spouse or something like that, right? You're going to have patterns in how you're sharing that over time, and so to get a proactive plan to say, hey, here are things that you can work on this
Oh,
week
interesting. Right.
to improve. It could be a combination of insights scripture to memorize and focus on, meditate on, maybe certain people to seek out or conversations that you need to have, those kinds of things. So over time, you'll be able to better understand also what's my sentiment towards these things.
Hmm.
How do I talk about my relationship with my spouse, or how do I talk about work, or how do I talk about purpose, whatever the themes are, and how you share.
Yeah. That's really cool. And what I love about it most is it is like a fitness app. It's like a spiritual fitness app or even an emotional fitness app if you don't want to go down the spiritual lane, but
Yeah.
still you're enabling people to dig deeper into their own self-reflections and kind of find a path forward because let's face it, lots of people suffer from depression. And
Mm-hmm.
what does the modern medical world in America push on you? Drugs. And
Mm-hmm.
what are drugs going to do? They're going to dull your senses. A friend of mine had a really compelling and, in some sense, frightening theory about his now ex-wife who passed away a few years ago. He said she started taking some of these pills for depression, and he said, I think what happened is it just dulls the conscience, and
Mm-hmm.
then people get mean. And they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel the guilt because guilt is a message from your conscience. And hey, there's something that you need to work on and figure out that you did inappropriately
Yeah.
and reconcile with that. And see, I look at the problems around the world. I think most of the big problems stem from, well, A, miscommunication is one, but B, people not reconciling with themselves about times that they were wrong. And if
Mm-hmm.
you get people in positions of serious authority who are not willing to admit they're wrong about something, that's when big fat wars happen. And you get guys like Putin who, come on, how could he not be a sociopath? I mean, you look at this guy who is just forcing his own people into a meat grinder for,
Mm-hmm.
what is it, almost 4 years now? Is that right? I think so. Because
Are you
in
talking about Ukraine?
2022, yeah, Ukraine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, that war's gone on a lot longer than I think anyone thought.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's gone like way, 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 way
Yeah.
back. But
Um,
yeah. So I think this is wonderful that you're giving people a non-pharmaceutical way to work through issues because look, you get one life, man. You got to enjoy your life. You got to be happy. And I've always believed that happiness is the ultimate metric. What do you think
mm.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we understand happiness because we're able to come out of those dark times too, right?
Right. Oh
Otherwise,
yeah.
it would just be like the standard mode of operating. But I think especially with the younger generation, giving them the ability to, and this is something I've had to be very diligent about, making sure the app can handle this is ask like tough questions,
Right.
right? Tough questions about racism, tough questions about sexuality, you know, all these politics, all the interesting things that you may, take into a church setting or are afraid to take into a church setting for a variety of reasons. You
Right.
don't want to be laughed at, or you don't want to be
Right.
misunderstood, or someone to go, dismiss it. And so, yeah, I think that's part of it. And also, like, we all have things at the end of the day where you go, I'm kind of uncomfortable even saying this.
Right. Right.
Like, and so, just something that you might feel shame or guilt for, but you do, as you pointed out, you gotta work through some forgiveness there, forgiving
Right.
yourself, other people, not crushing it down. It's funny, we didn't talk about this, but my brother passed away from
Oh,
pharmaceutical overusage,
oh no.
so he
I'm
had a
sorry
drug
to hear that.
overdose. No, I
Oh,
appreciate it. And that is one of the things that kind of pushed me into understanding myself better, for sure. And I was using a lot of artistic practices for that. But just like, okay, there's people suck at talking about grief. you know, we're not very good at just addressing like that. Hey, we're human. We're going through things.
right.
So how do we move through those? Not living in this constant state of like victimhood, but how do we move through those and like grow through them? That's, I think, a very much a missing piece. And so when you said about like, hey, I can admit I did this thing and it wasn't good, it wasn't right, but let me move on. How do I understand that? And so in my research, I found a lot of people, they know the Bible has answers. I mean, goodness, you got so many fantastic authors over 1,500 years wrote this, and there's great messaging in there. But you may read something also that's a parable written for an agricultural time, and so you just fail to connect the dots on that,
Right.
whatever it may be. this will help you do that, help you understand your thoughts a bit better.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're using this corpus as the foundation because and that's another thing that these large language models are amazing at, again, is a discovery mechanism. It's like a magnifying glass that you can then point in any direction to get some answers to pull out useful information. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. Podcast bonus segment is coming up in 1 second. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis. Great show today, talking all about different applications of AI. And our final couple segments are with Preston Zeller. He's done a lot of different things with AI. And this latest thing is very, very cool is psalmlog.com, just like a psalm, Psalm log.com. And, I'm reminding myself, Preston, again, of how awesome these LLMs are at being able to ingest large amounts of text and then reflect back little bits and pieces according to your prompt or whatever your question is. Like I'm dealing with my mother having passed away. What are some
Mm,
passages I can find? I mean, you used to be able to use Google for this. It's interesting. Google is, in many ways, it's on its heels, at least on the search front, because ChatGPT just basically pulverized their business model because
mm,
people are getting the whole answers now with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, obviously, which is doing a lot of good stuff in the code world. But with
mm.
ChatGPT, you can give it a whole body of text like your personal journal, for example, or the Bible. Now that won't fit into a context window, I don't think, but I'm
Right,
sure you've
right.
got something in the background to facilitate that. The
Mm,
point is that you can navigate quickly to something of meaning, and that's when you get value, when you can
mm,
go right to the phrase or the lesson plan, if you will, that's perfectly addressable to you at that moment. So we're now in this world of basically ad hoc discovery.
mm-hmm.
And that's meaningful because to sit there and try to like, okay, page one in the beginning, like
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
plow
yeah.
through this whole document,
Uh,
good luck getting to something of meaning for you. But if you have this tool that lets you get right to the story of Job, or for example, or
mm-hmm,
whatever the stories are, when you get right down to the specific granular details and reflect on your own life, that's powerful. That will open your mind to new ideas and new ways of thinking about things, and that's your attitude basically. That's why they say be grateful, always be grateful, be
mm,
thankful. I'll throw one last thing at you and just get your response on this. I remember my wife took me to see a speaker from the Himalayan Institute in New Orleans. This is like 25 years ago, probably, or 20 years ago, and he gave a talk on the secret to happiness.
mm,
And I was like, all right, do tell. And it's a one word answer, which I was fascinated by. He said compassion. He said the
mm,
more compassionate you are, the happier you'll be. So and what's the opposite of compassion? Well, judgment,
mm.
punishment, trying to punish people for doing bad things, whatever. He's like, no, no, no. Like that is not the path to happiness. But what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are isolated more than ever these days,
Right.
and which has its own sort of unhealthy things associated with that in terms of psychologically.
Right.
Um, and I think part of what Psalmlog is meant for is to it's not to perpetuate isolationism.
Hmm.
That's been one of these like things that comes up. Oh, well, you're trying to replace this certain roles in the church or whatever. I'm like, no, it's
Right.
bridging the gap,
Right.
really. So where someone, maybe they do lack compassion, or they're dealing with just a multitude of things, or wrestling with certain thoughts. Um, Getting them to the point where it actually slingshots them back into community is part of the goal.
Wow.
We're relational people. We're not meant to just be on a lonely island in our house, or
Right.
or in the middle of
Right.
the woods. Those things can be good for a time, right? Because you clear your mind, you go spend time with God in the woods, great. But you're there all alone all the time. We were missing this interaction. And so, yeah, being able to pull people out of that mode and is part of the purpose there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually saw, you made me think of something. Deion Sanders gave a talk. He was a guest at a conference. I guess this is a year ago, maybe, at the Boomy conference. And yeah, I grew up with Neon Deion. He was amazing. The guy was just unbelievable, and just very flashy, but just so fast. And he has such a drive. and he is a very religious person. And he had this line that just blew my mind. He talked about as you get older, he said there's different devils for different levels. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
man, that is powerful. And he actually gave me, it's interesting, he gave me very specific advice because I
Mm.
was dealing with some issues in my career choices and just kind of thinking about life because the AI disruptor is shaking up the entire software industry, and
Yeah.
that's been my
Everything.
bread and butter forever. And
Mhm.
so I was like, wow, should I go down this path, that path, or should I try some other things? And he had one line. He said, "Focus on the main thing." That's what he said. Focus on the main thing. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. Don't give up. Like I know this
Mhm.
is the main thing for me. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult right now, but stay focused. Don't get distracted. Focus on the main thing. And ever since then, I was like, good point. Thanks,
Mm.
Dion. It's great too because the interviewer was Steve Lucas, the CEO of Boomi, and
Mm.
there's a big audience. Okay, all these people are in the crowd, and Steve goes. I was near the front row because I'm in the analyst section basically. But Steve says to Neon, "Okay, this is a chance I want you all to be able to ask a question." And I just boom, I raised my hand immediately, and I didn't notice it at the time, but I was recording it,
Mm.
and Dion saw me immediately said, "Yes, sir," like that, and pointed to me. I was like, Dion Sanders just called me sir. I'll take that to the bank. And I asked him a question. He gave a great answer too. I said, "How do you keep your team from not getting distracted or like your children?" He goes, "My children? I'll tell you about my children." He dove right in. He's like, "I keep them focused," and that's where he said, "There's different devils at different levels."
uh,
Isn't that good? I was like, "Ooh, that
yeah,
rhymes."
it makes sense because I think as you get older and you mature in these different ways, and I'm middle aged at this point, but yeah, there's different types of condemnation you feel for these different things,
Right,
and what are your and even to some degree, the greater your aspirations become, you hit taller mountains,
right.
and so yeah, how are you staying on the kind of the righteous path without being thrown off, and I don't think it's not like all that's perfect either, right? I mean, it's
Right.
like the whole, and we read about this, someone calls a certain amount of achievement, they go, oh, it's an overnight success. You're like, yeah, it was overnight after 30 years of
That's
toiling.
right. That's
So
right. That's right.
to what we were talking about kind of earlier, how the media can grossly misrepresent things, and you're just seeing the sliver. And so
Right.
it's like there's just a lot of persistence and resilience that comes along with that. The pursuit of something you're after, right? And
Yeah.
so, uh, yeah,
That's good.
no, that's a good point.
That's good stuff. Well, listen, folks, look this gentleman up online, Preston Zeller, Zeller, psalmlog.com. It's PSALMLOG.com. Very cool stuff, very creative and productive use of artificial intelligence. And, last comment I'll make, the, our school keeps trying to tell the kids that AI is bad. And like I've noticed this, all the kids are like, oh, that's AI, dad. Like that's AI. AI is killing all the animals. It's using all the water. I'm like, okay, AI has not killed any animals. Like AI is not using all the water. There's plenty of water out there. It's going to be all right. Yes, they do use a lot of compute power, so there's that. But come on. There are creative uses and less creative uses. But check out Preston Zeller for a very creative use of large language models. We'll talk to you next time. You'll be listening to Inside Analysis.